Hi, everybody. I'm Ron Hoon, and this is the Great American Story. As always, John Neville joins. John is the creator of the Great American Story, and we're going way, way, way back in the time machine today, Johnny.
We are. We're going back to the George Washington era, the 18th century, late 18th century, during his presidency.
Sure.
His first. He was a two-term president, as you know. So this was, we're talking about something that, well, this was probably the first real challenge to federal authority that the young nation would experience.
That's
right?
a really good way to put it. And, you know, as beloved as he was as the father of our country, you would have thought maybe his 8 years in office would have just gone as smooth as possible.
Yeah.
Not even close.
Not quite.
I mean, we have some things to tell you today that you may or may not be aware of, but it was in 1791 the first time that there was a federal tax, an excise tax, on an American-made product. Up till that point, it was all tariffs on things that were made elsewhere and shipped into America. But it was also the first time American troops were sent out into the field to potentially, if they had to, battle against American citizens.
Yeah,
and those are some pretty big headlines, John.
Big time. And you think that the people's aversion to taxes is a new thing? Certainly not. This thing goes way back.
Yeah.
And that is why I titled this episode "The Republic's First Hangover," because we're talking about the Whiskey Rebellion.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
So Alexander Hamilton had a problem. He ran the Treasury Department. There had been all of these East Coast wealthier investors who had invested in war bonds to help pay for winning the Revolutionary War. And thank goodness we did.
Absolutely.
But there was a big price tag, especially if you do the computations of how much money we're talking about from 1790 compared to today. It's still a big amount. It's $50 million.
Sure.
And he knew that they had to get those war bonds paid off, or frankly, they weren't really going to have very much credibility as a country.
Yeah. And from what I understand, Washington was kind of opposed to this tax initially. And then he met with some people and ended up going through Congress, and they ended up taxing whiskey.
Yeah.
And the way it worked out was that this tax really hurt the small distillers. And we should go back maybe just a little bit and talk about the whole whiskey business and trade. I mean, whiskey was... that was a big deal back then. I mean, it was a form of currency.
It was a form of currency, and Pennsylvania, which is where the Whiskey Rebellion happened and what we're going to be talking about today, it had produced, I think, about 25% of all of the country's whiskey. So, yeah, it was produced to be sold. It was basically coming off of small farms who were, for the most part, just eking out a meager living. And they're like, why is this government hundreds of miles away from us that doesn't really do anything for us, taxing us and choosing to put this burden on us way out here in Western Pennsylvania, as opposed to maybe sharing, well, the wealth, if you want to call it that, up and down the East Coast, where people really, really did benefit so much from the winning of the war. And
remember, we're coming right off of the Revolution. So the whole taxation without representation was ringing very clear in their heads. So the small mom and pop distilleries, the small, the distilleries that were in people's homes, they were being taxed 9 cents, 9 cents per barrel, maybe. 9 cents. I have it somewhere here. Versus the 6 cents. On the big distilleries. So they were being hurt more than the big distilleries. But the big distilleries could absorb the cost.
Yes. And, they looked at it. I'm sure they looked at it. And they're basically, in the very earliest days, it wasn't like the clash of two parties, but there were definitely two ways of thinking about this new country of ours.
Yeah.
And one was the Jeffersonian view, right?
Yep.
Where you're basically going to have an agriculture. And the vast majority of people in the country back in the 1790s were involved in agriculture, either working it or owning a little farm, that kind of a thing. And that was Thomas Jefferson's view of the future of America. Alexander Hamilton, on the other hand, he looked at it as we need to be one of the leading countries in the world, and we better get our finances in order, and we better start getting these bonds paid. Still, his decision to impact, potentially ruin the way of life for these folks, especially in 5 counties in western Pennsylvania, to be felt so strongly. It just makes you wonder, couldn't he have come up with a better plan?
Yeah, you wonder. It really was ruinous for these families.
Yes.
And I did check my notes. It was per gallon. So they're, 6 cents versus 9 cents per gallon. But the fact that this was, that whiskey was often used as currency, a lot of the farmers saw this as a tax on currency, not just a tax on a good, but now you're taxing our currency. So we think of that today and we go, well, of course, everything's taxed. However, back then, it had to have been paid in cash as well, which they did not have access to money the way they do.
I don't think there was a single ATM in Pennsylvania at that time, John.
Well, no kidding, right? And so obviously this was met with a lot of resistance right off the bat. There was, we're not paying this. They would have to send out people to the farms to collect it. Well, some of those guys met with interesting,
they did.
Circumstances when they would go out there.
And there was a lot of tarring and feathering going on. The tax was passed in 1791, and the anger just boiled year by year. In fact, Will, let's fast forward now to 1794. It's been 3 years, and things are really starting to get violent. There is a tax collector, a federal employee, basically, named John Neville. Protesters. Now, here's something interesting to keep in mind, John. These rebels out in western PA, they ran roughshod over that whole part of the state.
They did.
They intimidated but not only those who were trying to collect the tax, they would go after the people who willingly paid the tax, or maybe even not willingly. I mean, they did everything they could to try to clamp down on it. They get to a point in 1794, summertime, July, where they converge on the home of John Neville at Bower Hill.
Bower Hill, that's right.
And they demand, like they did everywhere else, they demand that he resign his position. But he was different. He refused.
Yeah.
And that's when the Battle of Bower Hill ensued. These rebels, they show up, and not a huge number, a few dozen. Yeah. Anywhere between 30 and 50. And they demanded, basically, that he give up his position. He said no. Guns are drawn, shots ring out, and in this small group of rebels, one of their number, a man named Oliver Miller, lies dead.
Correct. Yeah. So there's a break there, right? Afterwards, there was the rebels got together and decided they were going to try to have talks with them. Yeah. They returned to Bowers Hill, and there was. It was a testy. The delegation they met, and it was a testy meeting. Yeah, and it just got ugly. It got uglier from there, and the rebels ended up burning down the house.
Well, after that first night, the outrage, as you can imagine, grew. Yeah, out in the hills of western Pennsylvania, and the alarm was raised.
No doubt.
And so they went from 30, 40, 50 rebels. The very next night, they returned to Bower Hill, and now they're angry. Yeah. And they're ready for a fight. Everybody's armed. Yep. It's interesting. They actually allowed the women and children in Neville's home to leave.
Yeah, they did.
Before the fighting began.
John McFarland, who was the rebel that said, "Hold your fire," he eventually actually was shot and killed. Yep. As another casualty of this whole thing.
Yes. And so, in the end, Neville has to flee his home. He's hiding in a ravine. I want to go out there now and explore Bower Hill because he has fled out into a ravine somewhere not far from there. And, he's still fighting, but he's losing this battle. They burn his home to the ground.
They do.
This is the point, I think, where George Washington decided something's going to have to be done.
Without question, yeah. And you got to wonder what was going through Washington's mind at this time. I have to think he may have been reticent to call up a militia because you're talking about people fighting their own countrymen.
Oh, yes.
Right? So I have to believe there was a conflict there.
And there was a lot of skepticism in the Congress about even forming an army. You know, they were saying, why do we need an army? Who are we now going to go to war with? We have our own country. But surely this army will never be used against its own citizens, will it? Well, look at where we are.
And
there's an army marching out to western Pennsylvania
of 13,000 people.
Yeah. And George Washington is leading this army.
Interesting note.
Yeah.
That militia was bigger than the army that he led
at
Yorktown.
Incredible.
Isn't that something?
Well, you know, I mean, he's the father of our country. He was beloved amongst all factions during that time. But he was actually a brilliant military mind. He had learned so much, and he knew that they had to have a show of force that was so strong that the rebels would give up. Now, in the second half of today's show, we'll tell you whether they did or not. But he knew what it was going to take to win.
An interesting note, too, that I read was that there were that Pennsylvania had a hard time raising their militia quota for this because of the simple fact that you're countrymen against countrymen.
Yes.
So of course, like, who's going to go? Like, I'm not going to go fight my neighbor over this. So there was some struggle to raise that obviously they did raise a huge number for back then.
Kind of like Virginia in the Civil War. Where it was, you know, brother against brother in many states, but in that one in particular.
Exactly.
So we are going to talk a lot more about this, and we're actually going to take you right into the places where so much of this unfolded. But John, first we got a question here.
We got the trivia question of the week. Okay, here we go. President Washington, leading the federal response to the Whiskey Rebellion, appointed Henry Light Horse Harry Lee, father of Robert E. Lee, ironically, to command the massive militia army that marched west. Which state contributed to the single largest contingent of troops to this federal army of nearly 13,000 men? We got New Jersey, Pennsylvania, or Virginia. So,
okay, so the battle's in Pennsylvania.
But he raised troops
Jersey
from multiple states.
Is right across the way there, and Virginia, of course, is, you know, the home of Thomas Jefferson and more. We'll have the answer when we come back on The Great American Story. Hope you can stay with us. Well, we welcome you back, and we would love to know what your opinion is on our latest poll of the great national parks in America. John, why are we doing this?
Well, we're doing a national park tournament, and we're going to see what our viewers think is the best national park in the country.
I don't know if anybody's ever done a national park tournament before, but we're doing it on the Great American History Show.
Absolutely. So every week we do a little, we'll do a different, we take four and we'll whittle it down. We do four different ones each week.
Yeah. Okay, and this week?
And this week we've got, let's see, we got Yellowstone, we've got Redwood Forest, we've got Hawaii volcanoes, and we have Acadia up in Maine.
Okay.
So it's fun.
Go vote, right?
Absolutely.
Just go to YouTube.
Really cool. Yeah,
right.
Go to YouTube and to the address that we just put up, and it's fun. I mean, we're trying to come up with some really cool American history questions, and people seem to be having fun with it. So.
Speaking of, before the break, John asked us this question. Hopefully you folks are playing right along at home. Johnny?
Yep. President Washington, leading the federal response to the Whiskey Rebellion. He raised a massive militia that marched west. Which state contributed to the single largest contingent of troops to this army of nearly 13,000 men? Ron?
I think, you know what's funny is I did my research on which states produce the most whiskey, but I didn't do my research on which states produce the most men prepared to fight.
See, I try to stump you each week.
Yeah, so. You really did a good job. But considering that the Lee family was out of Virginia, I am going to go with Virginia.
Oh, Good guess, but you're wrong.
Of course.
Just
happens all the time.
No, Pennsylvania.
Really?
Go figure, right?
Wow.
I mean, even though the rebellion was in Pennsylvania, they actually recruited about 6,500 men.
Wow.
And, sometimes overlooked because of Harry Lee or Light Horse Harry Lee being, Robert E. Lee's father being from Virginia.
Yes, right.
You would think that would have the highest.
Good, John.
But there you go.
I know you put a lot into that
You
question.
got it, man.
Try to stump us. That's Johnny for sure. Okay, so back to our story here.
Yeah.
Just a little bit of a backdrop of what's going on. We already talked about the fact that the government was moving from New York to Philadelphia, and it was given 10 years by an act of Congress to literally create a capital from scratch.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of people who were very skeptical that, at that point around the world, that the American experiment, John, was even going to work. And out in the Ohio country, just beyond where we're talking about here in western Pennsylvania, there were a number of strong Native American leaders who were fighting against this sort of slow but continued progression of settlers coming into their country.
Of course.
And we were literally almost at the very same time. It was literally within a matter of weeks of Washington marching his troops out to western PA to try to quell this rebellion, that just beyond out there in Ohio came what was known as St. Clair's defeat, which, John, it doesn't get anywhere near the talk of Custer's last stand, but it was a way worse moment of slaughter of American troops, U.S. troops. Let me make sure I've got the numbers here.
For sure.
During that battle, which happened in Ohio, the number of Native fighters who were killed was about 20. The number of U.S. soldiers who were killed in that fight was over 630.
Wow.
It was literally a slaughter. And it happened at the same time that this rebellion was fomenting in Pennsylvania. And there were just a lot of questions about, well, is this government even going to survive? And what is the real future of America? It took some time to settle it.
Can you imagine? The Republic is new. I mean, you're talking a decade, if that. Right? And Washington, I'm sure, is just trying to put the pieces of the puzzle together. How is this all going to work? And you've got politics involved. You got unpopular taxes now, and now you've got a sitting president going out with a military militia to confront a rebellion. It's never happened before. Never happened since.
Never happened since. It's
unheard
really
of.
Quite incredible.
Yeah. You have some awesome stuff from this part of history.
I think so. We are now going to take you into Bedford, Pennsylvania. The president marched with those troops that far into the field, and they were ready for battle, but it never came. Because the rebels saw what was coming their way, and they just melded away into the hills. A lot of them never to be heard from again. But if you go into downtown Bedford, you can see the house where the family put up George Washington. Naturally, he's going to select, one of the nicer, sturdier homes in town. But when I was there not long ago, I had a chance to just kind of wander across a main street that is filled with history.
I'm walking down the street in Bedford, PA, and there's a building. I'll show it to you. It's just literally right here, right past the jewelry shop, right past that very narrow little alleyway right there. Would you look at this? Check this out. National Register of Historic Places. And here's one. General George Washington. The only president in our nation's history to lead troops in the field of battle came out here to knock down the Whiskey Rebellion. Here, let me just turn this around so you can see it right up here. Okay? There it is in a nutshell. The Espy House, built about 1771, was the headquarters of the president at the time, George Washington, October of 1794, when he came here to Bedford to review the troops assembled to quell the Whiskey Rebellion. This building, I was talking to my son Jordan a little while ago. He's like, Dad, touch it. This is the original building that was built. That was the headquarters of the President of the United States. 13,000 troops. Here, the backstory of the Whiskey Rebellion is absolutely fascinating because, it was the first real test of the authority of the federal government. It was the first time they had ever instituted a tax on a domestic product, not tea from England or anything like that. This was whiskey that was produced here. They had to raise funds. They were still trying to pay off all the war costs of the American Revolution. There's that building right there behind me. It's so cool. So he, the president, and his Treasury Secretary, guy I'm sure you heard of, Alexander Hamilton, said, well, we got to raise some money. Let's put a tax on booze. Specifically on distilled spirits, basically meaning whiskey. Well, out here in Pennsylvania, that hit the farmers hard.
So, John, that was really an experience. I just went to Bedford. I knew it was a historic town, but I didn't know that, George Washington slept here, as the phrase is so commonly said.
Love seeing that history preserved the way it is.
And I'm sure school kids in Pennsylvania, John, learned the stories well, but for the rest of us, I do think we could learn more about the Whiskey Rebellion.
Yeah.
Because Washington considered the worst of the rebels, a man named David Bradford.
Right.
Now, as he had come through the countryside, basically what he wanted the people to do was to sign a loyalty oath to the United States government that they were not going to be participating in this rebellion any longer. And if they were willing to do so, as a magnanimous fellow, he basically was willing to pardon anyone and everyone, except for one man.
Yeah, he did pardon everybody. I think 2 were captured, right? And he pardoned them. But the rebels scattered.
Yeah,
this never turned into this bloody, battlefield, clash.
Right.
Fortunately,
and thank goodness.
Yeah.
Right?
That would have. Who knows what that would have done to the course of history?
And
right?
I thought to myself, too bad we didn't have drones back then. Could you imagine a drone flying over an army of between 12 and 13,000 men headed out to fight this fight? Yeah. But anyway, as far as Bradford goes, John, he is an interesting character. The reason that Washington would not pardon him was that he was in the government. He was a wealthy lawyer. He was a deputy attorney general.
Wow.
But he was the leader of the rebels. He led the mobs that attacked John Neville's home that we talked about at the beginning. Today, you can actually go inside that house, which I did, and take a look at this. And then the other thing that's so interesting to me is, as we sit here in the parlor, is that, you always hear people talk about presidential pardons. Who's going to pardon who for this and that? Once they captured the rebels, he issued presidential pardons. First time that had ever happened in the early part of our nation.
He did. This is the first time the use of the presidential pardon came into play. George was smart enough not to confiscate property, not to do anything that would really more separate these people from the rest of the country.
Right.
Did not want to anger them, and he was smart enough to do that, and he finally issued pardons for just about everybody involved in the Whiskey Rebellion, except for David Bradford.
The man who owned and built this house, he never pardoned him, the only one.
He wanted David arrested by hook or by crook.
Okay.
Instructions he gave to Alexander Hamilton. Alexander Hamilton missed him by about 3 to 5 days.
Okay.
He came to this house. Pounded on that door.
Pounded on this door. Can you imagine? There's Alexander Hamilton. Let me in. Yeah. Just on the other side of the door. It's fantastic.
And but he missed David.
Yeah.
And they chased him down the Ohio River quite a ways and lost him around Cincinnati. And David made it to Sandwich, West Florida, and created a new life for himself there.
Yeah. Okay. So in the end, that was the only person who was never pardoned, but they really never caught up with him down there. So Neville fled to the south. There was a shootout with the federal forces, but he scooted on down the river and managed to start his new life down there. And he was eventually pardoned.
Oh.
But not until 1799 by another president, John Adams.
Of course,
How
right?
about that?
Yeah. Couple of interesting notes. There was a flag that had come out of this. Like if you're into historic flags, it's kind of cool to see the iterations of different flags throughout that.
Sure.
But there was a Whiskey Rebellion flag. It had 13 stars on it, and I'll put a picture up here with the eagle holding the red and white ribbon on the background of the dark blue. Mm-hmm. Real quick though, to this day, there are some distillers, I am told, that hang a portrait of Alexander Hamilton upside down in their distillery as an act of defiance against his tax.
They're in Pennsylvania.
They're in Pennsylvania and other places.
Some other places as well. Okay, it's an incredible story and one that we have really enjoyed sharing with you on The Great American Story.